My wife drove to her mother's old farmhouse in Culpeper County 3 times every year for 19 years, and I never once went with her. Not once. I told myself I was too busy, first with the business, then after I sold the business, with whatever I could find to feel useful. After Cora passed in January, my son started calling every week about selling the place. "It's bleeding money, Dad. You're retired. You don't need the headache." 9 months of that. Then I finally drove out there alone one Wednesday morning in October, just to collect her things before we listed it. When I pushed open the front gate and saw the vegetable garden running the full length of the yard, tomatoes still heavy on the vine, marigolds lining every bed, a winter squash harvest stacked neat against the barn door, I stopped walking, because nobody had told me anyone was gardening here. Nobody had mentioned anyone was here at all. I should back up. My name is Alton, and 9 months ago I buried the woman who knew me better than I knew myself. Cora and I were married for 31 years. She was a retired school librarian, quiet, methodical, patient in a way I never quite managed to be. She liked crossword puzzles and strong tea and feeding every stray cat that wandered into our yard in Richmond. She did not, as far as I knew, have any hidden life. She was simply Cora, my Cora. The farmhouse had belonged to her mother, Edna, who died in 2004. It sat on 11 acres in Culpeper County, about 2 hours southwest of Richmond. Old white clapboard siding, a wraparound porch, a barn that hadn't held animals in 40 years. Cora's family had worked that land for 3 generations. After Edna passed, Cora inherited the property and kept paying the taxes on it. Every March, July, and October, she drove out there alone. I assumed she was checking on the place, maybe doing some light maintenance, touching whatever piece of her childhood still lived in those walls. I never pushed to come along. She never pushed me to join her. Now I was starting to understand that I should have asked a lot more questions. The pressure from my son started about 6 weeks after the funeral. Dalton works in commercial real estate in Northern Virginia, makes a good living, and he approaches everything, including his father's grief, the way he approaches a zoning variance, with a cost-benefit analysis and a deadline. "Dad, I ran the numbers," he said one Sunday afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop open. "Property taxes alone are running you $2,200 a year. Add utilities, insurance, the maintenance fund. You're looking at close to $8,000 annually for a property you've visited twice in the last decade." "Your mother visited it," I said. "Mom's gone," he said it the way you'd state any other fact. "The sky is blue, the market's up, Mom's gone. You need to start making decisions based on your actual situation, not on sentiment." I was 68 years old. I had a pension from my years running an electrical contracting business, Social Security, and a reasonable amount in savings. I was not in financial trouble. Dalton had a way of framing things that made you feel one bad decision away from disaster, and grief has a way of making you susceptible to that kind of framing. "Properties in Culpeper County are moving right now," he said. "I've already had an informal conversation with a colleague who handles rural residential. He thinks we're looking at 180 to 210, depending on the condition of the structure." I looked up from my coffee. "You talked to someone about listing it?" "Just exploratory, Dad, just to understand what we're working with." He closed the laptop. "Holding onto a property that's costing you $8,000 a year and has no practical use isn't honoring Mom's memory. It's just expensive." I didn't say anything. I was thinking about the last time I'd seen Cora pack her overnight bag for one of her trips. She'd folded her clothes so carefully, the way she did everything. She'd kissed me on the cheek at the door and said, "I'll call you when I get there." She always called when she got there. "I want to go out and take a look myself," I said finally. "Collect whatever personal things are still there. Then we can talk." Dalton frowned. "That's a 4-hour round trip, Dad. What's actually there that requires you to go in person?" "I can have someone from the office do a walkthrough and send photos." "I'm not sending someone from your office through your mother's family home," I said. "I'm going myself." He backed off after that, but not without extracting a promise that I'd call when I arrived and again when I left. He was 42 years old and he still needed to manage everything. Cora used to say Dalton came out of the womb already concerned about liability. We'd laughed about it then. I left Richmond before 7 on a Wednesday, thermos of coffee on the passenger seat. Cora's handwriting on a notepad giving me the gate combination I probably should have already known by heart. The drive down Route 29 was prettier than I remembered. Rolling hills, horse farms, the hardwoods going gold and copper in the October light. Cora had loved this time of year. She called it the good weeks, when the heat finally broke and everything went quiet. I turned onto her family's road around 9. The lane was a quarter-mile of packed gravel cutting through second-growth timber, and I had to slow down for a deer that stood in the middle of it blinking at my headlights. When the farmhouse finally came into view, something stopped me cold. I had expected neglect. Dalton had described the place as deteriorating, based on photos a neighbor had apparently sent him, though he'd been vague about when exactly he'd arranged for that. I'd braced myself for peeling paint and collapsed gutters, for the particular sadness of a house emptied of its people. What I was not prepared for was the garden. Vegetable beds ran the full south-facing side of the yard, Steak tomatoes still thick with fruit even in October. Raised beds of kale and collard greens that somebody had clearly put serious labor into over many seasons. The porch railing had been repaired. I could see the new wood where the old boards had rotted through. Someone had hung a wind chime from the porch eave, simple pieces of bamboo on a cord, turning slowly in the morning air. I sat in my truck with the engine off for a long moment. Then I got out and walked toward the front door. I'd barely set foot on the bottom porch step when the door opened. A Filipino woman stood in the frame. I guessed her to be in her mid-50s, small and composed-looking, with dark hair going silver at the temples and a dish towel in her hands. When she saw me, the color drained from her face. "Mr. Alton," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm sorry," I managed. "I think there may be some misunderstanding. This property—" "I know who you are," she said quietly. "Please come inside. My name is Celia. I'll explain everything." I should have been more alarmed than I was, but something about the way she looked at me, like she was seeing a piece of someone she'd already lost, kept me from turning around. I stepped inside. The living room was different from the last time I'd been in it, maybe 12 years ago. Different furniture, different arrangement. But there were things I recognized. The blue pitcher Edna had kept on the sideboard for as long as I'd known the family, the oval braided rug that had been in this room since Cora was a child, and on the bookshelf by the window, a photograph that hit me square in the chest. Cora and this woman, standing in the garden I just walked past, both of them laughing at something off camera. "You knew my wife," I said. "She was the best person I have ever known," Celia said. She sat across from me and told me. Her family had come to Culpeper County from the Philippines in 2008. Her husband Ramon had found work on a horse farm nearby. They had 3 children. Angelo was 7 at the time, her daughter Bea was 4, and Celia had been pregnant with their youngest Tomas when the flooding hit in 2011. A slow-moving storm system stalled over the county for 4 days, and the rental house they'd been living in took 2 feet of water through the ground floor. They lost nearly everything. The landlord refused to repair it. They had nowhere to go. Cora had been at the farmhouse that March, doing her regular visit. She'd driven past their situation on the way to pick up groceries. Celia, very pregnant, and 2 young children sitting on the tailgate of their truck with wet belongings piled around them on the roadside. Cora had stopped her car. She didn't ask many questions, Celia said. She said, "Load what you can. Come with me." She'd brought them here. For a few weeks, Cora had said. The few weeks became months. Ramon found steadier work at a nearby vineyard. Celia started helping with the property maintenance. The children started school in town, and gradually, without any formal announcement, the farmhouse became their home. She charged us rent, Celia said, which surprised me. She said she didn't want us to feel like charity. $300 a month, far below what it was worth, but real. She put every dollar of it into a separate account. I never knew what she did with it. Celia's husband Ramon had died 3 years ago, heart failure sudden at 51. In the months after, Cora had started coming more often. Not just the regular 3 visits, but sometimes an extra trip, just a night or 2 quietly, without explanation when she got home. She used to sit with me on the porch after the children went to bed, Celia said. We'd talk about Ramon, about what it means to keep going when the person who made sense of everything is just gone. She paused. She talked about you often, Mr. Alton. What did she say? Celia smiled, careful. That you were a good man who got quieter as you got older. That she didn't always know how to reach you anymore, but that she loved you. She said that every time. I looked out the window. Angelo, 22 now, broad-shouldered, unhurried, was visible through the glass, rinsing his hands at the outdoor spigot the way someone does who has done it 10,000 times in the same place. He had grown up here. This was the only yard he'd rinsed his hands in since he was 7 years old. There's something else, Celia said. She went down the hallway to Edna's old room and came back carrying a wooden box, narrow, a small brass latch about the length of a shoebox. I recognized it immediately. I had made it in a woodworking class 25 years ago. I had given it to Cora for Christmas, and she had thanked me warmly, and I had never seen it again. I had assumed it was stored in a closet somewhere, the way gifts sometimes go when they don't quite find their purpose. It had found its purpose. She wrote in this place, Celia said, setting the box on the table. When she needed to say something she couldn't say out loud. She left me alone with it. The box held a leather journal and a separate envelope marked in Cora's handwriting. For Alton, only if something happens to me. I opened the journal first. The earliest entry was from 2013. Cora's handwriting was neat and even, the same script she'd used on grocery lists and birthday cards for 30 years. I drove down today and Bea had lost her first tooth. She came running across the yard to show me. I stood there watching this little girl hold her tooth in her palm, so proud of it, and I thought about how Dalton lost his first tooth, and I called my mother and we cried a little, the way you do with milestones. Nobody here has that, no grandparents on this side of the ocean. Celia is doing all of it alone, and she never complains, not once. I turned pages. The county has an adult literacy program, Thursday evenings at the library. Celia has been going for 8 months without telling me. I asked the coordinator if they needed volunteers. I start next week. I hadn't known about the tutoring program. Cora had apparently been volunteering at the county library for years. I had not known this was something she did. I had not thought to ask. The entries skipped through time. Angelo's high school graduation, Tomas learning to drive, Bia getting into the nursing program at Germana Community College, Cora writing about summer thunderstorms coming in over the ridge, about the way the light changed in October, about missing me in terms so direct they were hard to read. Alton expresses love by solving problems. When something is wrong, he fixes it. When nothing is wrong, he doesn't always know what to do with himself. I used to wish he would just sit with me sometimes without needing a reason. Here, I learned how to sit. I want to bring that home with me. I keep forgetting to. Then, 4 years ago, the cardiologist says my aortic valve isn't opening the way it should. He wants to monitor it every 4 months minimum. I asked if I could do the follow-ups at a practice out here rather than in Richmond. He said yes. I haven't told Alton. I will. I'll tell him when I understand it better myself. She hadn't told me. Not 4 years ago, not 3, not 2. She had been driving out here for her cardiac monitoring appointments, staying with Celia and telling me she was doing property maintenance. Every 4 months, I had kissed her goodbye at the door and told her to drive safe. Celia drove me to my appointment today. She waited in the parking lot for 2 hours with a thermos of coffee and a crossword book. I told her she didn't have to wait. She said, "Mrs. Cora, where else would I be?" I cried in the car on the way home, and I'm not entirely sure it was about the appointment. I had to set the journal down. Through the window, I could see Celia at the clothesline, moving slowly, giving me time. I picked up the envelope. My love, if you're reading this, something happened before I found the courage to tell you all of this in person. I'm sorry. I kept meaning to. Every time I came home from here, I stepped back into our regular life, and the words got away from me. They always got away from me. I need to tell you something about our son. Dalton found out about Celia's family 2 years ago. He was helping me organize the property files. I'd made the mistake of asking him to, and he found the rental receipts. He drove out here without telling me, and he told Celia and her children they were trespassing and that he would have them removed. He told Angelo there would be legal consequences if they didn't leave voluntarily. Angelo was 19 years old. Alton, he was 19 years old, and a stranger was standing in his home threatening him. Angelo called me that evening. I drove out the next morning. I confronted Dalton. He said I was being taken advantage of. He said I was exposing myself to liability. He said the kindest thing he could do was protect me from my own poor judgment. I told him that if he ever contacted Celia's family again without my permission, I would revise my estate documents accordingly. He backed down, but he didn't change his mind. He just went quiet about it, waiting. Please don't let him sell this house out from under them. I've spoken with an attorney, a woman named Margaret Pemberton. Her card is at the bottom of the box, and she has documents prepared. I couldn't finalize everything without talking to you first. Maybe that was cowardly, but I wanted the choice to be yours. I love you. I loved you every single day of our life together, including the days I drove away from Richmond and felt the knot in my chest slowly loosen as the city fell behind me. That loosening was never about leaving you. It was about finding a part of myself I could only find here. I hope you understand that. I think when you're ready, you will. All my love, always Cora. I sat at that table without moving for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. When Celia knocked softly on the doorframe and asked if I wanted coffee, I said yes. She brought 2 cups and sat across from me and didn't speak, and I was grateful for exactly that, for the company without the words. Dalton came here, I said eventually. Yes. He threatened you. Angelo was very calm about it, Celia said carefully. Calmer than I was, he said. We'll wait and speak to Mr. Alton. She paused. He was 19. That's a hard thing to do when you're 19 and someone is telling you have to leave your home. Angelo came through the back door then, boots off at the mat, and I looked at him. This young man had grown up in my mother-in-law's farmhouse and had apparently known about my wife's heart condition and my wife's attorney and my wife's hidden journal all before I did. He met my eyes steadily. Senora Cora said you'd come eventually, he said. She said you were a man who needed time to get somewhere, but that once you understood something, you didn't look away from it. I didn't know if that was true. I was trying to make it true. I called Margaret Pemberton from the porch. She answered on the second ring and said she'd been expecting to hear from me, and that Cora had prepared everything thoroughly. There were 2 options, a long-term lease at a nominal rate with full legal tenant protections, or an outright transfer of ownership. Cora had set aside proceeds from a small investment account to cover property taxes for the next 10 years, under either arrangement. Dalton did not know about that account. I drove to Pemberton's office that afternoon. Before I left, Bay 19, just home from class, came to the door holding a container of food, rice, and a chicken dish her mother had made, offered shyly in case I got hungry on the road. She had Cora's same way of offering things, like she wasn't sure if you'd say yes, but she was hoping. I signed the transfer of ownership documents at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday in October. Dalton had called 3 times by the time I drove back to the farmhouse. I left the phone face down on the passenger seat. When I told Celia, she pressed both hands over her mouth and didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said, "This was always your decision to make. We would have understood either way." "It wasn't my decision to make," I said. "Your family earned this. You took care of her when I didn't even know she needed taking care of. This was always Cora's intention." Tomas, 16, long-limbed with his father's eyes, asked after dinner if I wanted to see the barn he and Angelo had been repairing over the summer. We walked out there in the early dusk and he showed me where they'd reframed the loft, the salvaged lumber from the Habitat Restore in town, the way Angelo had taught himself to notch the joints by watching videos online. "Signora Cora used to make me do my homework out here in the summer," he said, looking up at the repaired loft beams. "She said working inside makes everything feel like work. Outside makes everything feel like thinking." I studied the joinery he and his brother had built. It was solid, better than solid. "I used to do woodworking," I said. "She told me," Tomas said. "She showed me the box you made." Dalton called again at 8 that evening. I was on the porch with Celia and a cup of decaf, listening to the bamboo wind chime turn in the dark. I watched his name light up the screen and I let it ring. Whatever he had to say could wait until I was ready to hear it, and I was not ready yet. I was sitting on my wife's porch, in my wife's county, in the dark that she had loved, with people who had loved her in return. For the first time in 9 months, the weight in my chest felt like something I might actually be able to carry. I stayed 2 nights. On the second morning, Celia made breakfast and we all sat around the kitchen table. The 4 of them and me, and Angelo talked about a contract job at one of the local vineyards, and Bea talked about her clinicals starting in January, and Tomas made an argument about something I didn't fully follow, and I sat with my coffee and I listened. I didn't need to fix anything or solve anything or manage anything. I just sat there and let the morning happen around me. That was what Cora had been driving out here for. All those years, that was what she had been trying to find and eventually to give me. 6 weeks later, I made an offer on a small house 12 minutes down the road. 3 bedrooms, more than I needed, but there was a workshop in the back that the previous owner had used for furniture restoration. I closed in December. Dalton and I have spoken twice since October. Both conversations were short. I told him what I had done and why. I told him that his mother had known what he had done and why. I told him I loved him and that I hoped someday he would understand the difference between protecting something and owning it. He didn't take that well. Maybe he will, in time. Maybe he won't. Cora would have kept trying longer than I'm willing to, but she was always the more patient one. I drove out to the farmhouse on Christmas Eve with a toolbox and some wood I'd been collecting, and Tomas and I spent the afternoon in the workshop while Celia and Bea cooked inside, and Angelo wandered in and out asking about tools he didn't know the names of yet. I taught Tomas how to cut a dovetail joint. He learned it faster than I had. Cora would have been very pleased about that. She always said I was slow to start things, but that once I started, I was hard to stop. She was right. She usually was.